months ago, she had 40 employees, 12 trucks, and a company she built from nothing. Then, she lost all of it. Overnight. This is not a story about how she bounced back. It's a story about something harder than that. It's about what happens when you have to start over, and why that might be the most important thing that ever happened to her. The call came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, but this time, it wasn't just her mother in that hospital, it was her whole life on the line. 6 months before that night, Mira Osei had lost everything she had spent a decade building. Her logistics company, the one she had sacrificed sleep, relationships, and her 20s for, had collapsed. A partnership gone wrong, a contract dispute she couldn't afford to fight in court, and a cash flow crisis that came all at once, like 3 waves hitting before you can stand up from the first. She had laid off 40 people who trusted her. She had sold the fleet, she had closed the office, and then she had gone home, pulled the curtains shut, and disappeared for 3 months. She wasn't depressed, she told herself. She was just resting. She was lying. The night her mother had the stroke, Mira found herself in a hospital waiting room at 3 a.m., holding a bad cup of coffee, staring at her phone. She opened her notes app, the same one she'd used years ago to sketch the idea that became a coma supply. She hadn't opened it in months. She scrolled through old entries, old dreams, old versions of herself that felt like a different woman entirely. And then, in the silence of that waiting room, something cracked open. She typed one line. What do you do when the thing you built your identity around is gone? She stared at it. Then she typed the answer. You find out who you are without it. Mira's mother had started over 3 times. She had lost a business in her 30s when the market shifted and her fabric supplier vanished overnight. She had rebuilt. She had lost her husband, Mira's father, at 47, with 3 children still in school. She had rebuilt. She had worked a sewing machine 6 days a week with no guarantee of tomorrow, and she had never once called it starting over. She called it continuing. Sitting in that waiting room, watching her mother fight for her life, Mira finally understood what her mother had been teaching her all along. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is the price of a life fully lived. When her mother was discharged, Mira made one decision. She was not going to rebuild the same thing. She was going to rebuild herself first. She sat at her desk, now just a kitchen table covered in notebooks, and she wrote down everything she had learned from the failure. Not what went wrong logistically, not the legal mistakes, the human lessons, the things she would carry forward regardless of what she built next. She wrote, I waited too long to ask for help. She wrote, I confused being busy with moving forward. She wrote, I let my worth become the company's worth. That was the real collapse. That list became her foundation. Not a business plan, not a pitch deck, a personal reckoning. And that, she would later say, was the most important document she ever wrote. 3 months later, Mira got behind the wheel again. Literally, she borrowed a truck, just like she had at the very beginning, and took a single small delivery contract. 1 clinic, 1 route. No team, no fleet, no office. Just her and a road she had driven 100 times before, feeling like it was the first time. The road was dusty and long and humbling. She had once managed 12 trucks from an office. Now she was driving 1 alone. She had 2 choices on that drive. She could feel like she had fallen back to the beginning, or she could feel like she was choosing to walk before she ran again, with the wisdom of someone who had already been to the finish line and back. She chose the second.
clinic, a nurse was waiting outside. She was young, maybe 22. She looked at the supply box in Mira's hands and said, "We've been waiting 3 weeks for this." Mira handed it over. And in that moment, standing in front of a small clinic with a borrowed truck and a humbled heart, she remembered exactly why she had started in the first place. Not to build a fleet, not to win contracts, not to speak at conferences. She had started because this moment right here mattered. Because somewhere, someone was waiting. Because the work itself was the point. When you lose everything, it strips away all the noise. What's left is the only question that ever mattered. Why are you really doing this? If your answer survives the loss, you have your reason to start again.
She sat in the truck and cried. But this time, the tears were different. They weren't about grief or gratitude or being overwhelmed by purpose. They were the tears of someone who had been carrying an enormous weight for a very long time and had finally, quietly, been given permission to put it down. Starting over is not glamorous. Nobody posts about the borrowed truck. Nobody films the kitchen table covered in notebooks. Nobody talks about the months when you don't know who you are anymore without the title, without the business, without the version of yourself everyone expected. But that invisible season, that painful private in-between, is not wasted time. It is the most important work you will ever do. The second time around, Mira changed one thing fundamentally. She stopped trying to prove something. The first time she had built a coma supply, she was fighting to be taken seriously, fighting to be seen in rooms that were not built for her, fighting to make the company big enough that no one could ignore it. And the fight had made her sharp, yes, but it had also made her brittle. This time, she walked into rooms differently. She asked for help without shame. She turned down contracts that didn't align. She said, "I don't know," when she didn't know. She built slowly and deliberately. And the people who came to work with her the second time came not because she was impressive, but because she was real. Authenticity, it turned out, was a far more durable foundation than ambition. Within 2 years, a coma supply existed again. Smaller this time, intentionally. Leaner, more focused, built on relationships rather than scale. The fleet was 5 trucks, not 12. The team was 22 people, not 40. But every single person on that team knew the mission. Every single contract was chosen deliberately. Mira stood in the yard one morning, watching her team work, and thought, "This feels different." It did, because she was different. The woman who had built the first Acoma supply had been running towards something. The woman who built the second one was building from something. From clarity, from loss, from the peculiar wisdom that only comes from having held something and let it go. She was invited to speak at a conference. The title of her talk was not about success. It was called, "What Failure Taught Me About Starting Over." Afterward, a young woman approached her, maybe 25, wearing a blazer that was slightly too big. She looked like someone standing at the edge of a decision. "I had a business," she said quietly. "It didn't work. I don't know if I should try again, or just move on." Mira looked at her for a long moment. "That's the wrong question," she said. "The question isn't whether to start again. The question is, who do you want to be when you do?" The young woman nodded slowly, like something had just settled in her chest. "Starting over," Mira continued, "is not going back to zero. It's going back to yourself. And if you do that honestly, that's not a step backward. That's the bravest thing a person can do." Here is what Mira knows now that she didn't know before. Starting over is not failure wearing a disguise. It is wisdom earning its stripes. The life you built before was not wasted. It was tuition. Every loss taught you what you actually value.
Every collapse showed you what was load-bearing and what was just decoration. Every humbling moment peeled away another layer of who you were pretending to be, until what was left was something truer and stronger and quieter. You are allowed to grieve the version of your life that didn't make it. Give it a proper goodbye. And then, when you are ready, or even before you feel ready, pick up the thing that still matters. Walk back to the beginning and begin again, differently, with everything you now know. The road is dusty. The truck is borrowed. The clinic is waiting. Start.
Kindly like and subscribe for more life-changing stories.